Hi, y'all. So, a little while ago, I posted a YouTube video talking about excuses and blames. Hi, y'all. So, I just wanted to pop on here and talk a little bit about some of the stages of burnout and a little bit about my own burnout journey and recovery. Um, because I had posted a video earlier about excuses and blame, how that's one way that the ego, the inner critic, tries to keep us stuck, keep us wallowing in the emotional negativity, right? So I happen to, I love the Burnout podcast. But specifically the Mandy Letho, the 7 realistic phases of burnout. I listened to this, I think, a total of 3 times all the way through. Um, it really hit home for me, especially with some of the ways that she mentioned how her burnout experience had been. And just to give you a little bit of a background with mine, um, I started seeing stages of burnout in undergrad, especially. I'm pretty sure that I had some prior to that, but it was definitely exturbated by trying to push myself through not only an art degree, but also a music degree, and keeping up with a career path that wasn't truly aligned to my authenticity and everything. And I had always had issues with chronic pain, um, but it was one of those things that you just bore with grace, because you don't show signs of weakness. All of these are outdated beliefs that, have not served our society very well, but were ingrained in us as a generational um, trauma system. And you jerk yourself up by your bootstraps, you put your big girl panties on, you when the going gets tough, you get tougher, those type of things. And I had seen that enacted in my influencers, my peer group, my parental unit, over and over and over again. And the depression that comes with it, the chronic pain that comes with it, the just the general unhappiness and everything that is applied with that. And once I think I was in my first official sculpture class in undergrad, and one weekend I was trying to finish a drawing. In my advanced drawing class, I was listening to my I think this was the same semester. If not, it was very close. I was having to listen to all of my British literature readings via Audible or something, wherever I could find them, because I literally did not have time to physically read myself. And I was having to dictate my papers to my aunt at the time because I was in two braces for the tendonitis that I had coming up from practicing piano so many hours a day, plus teaching piano, plus that was my, that was my main form of income at the time. Was I was a choir director and a pianist at a church. And so I was in braces with both hands, and I could no longer type out my art history papers, my British literature papers, and stuff like that. You find what works for yourself, right? And none of this was clicking that this was a problem. I just needed to push harder, right? Then I found myself in the emergency room I was literally having to hold myself up off of my lower spine. I believe I was around 21 at this time, maybe 22, and I could not walk. I was completely bent over, and I was in such excruciating pain, I couldn't do anything but cry. My family took me to the emergency room, the podunk little town emergency room that we went to, which was the closest. They didn't do x-rays, they didn't do ultrasounds, nothing happened. They just shot me with a steroid shot and sent me home with muscle relaxants and told me not to be a pack animal. I'm not a donkey. And I get that, in many ways, but that would have identified some major core issues to, instead of just creating a Band-Aid fix, right? If they had identified my scoliosis at that time, some things would have changed or been avoided. And instead, still, I'm just trucking. At that point in time, I was doing more and more in the sculpture realm and trying to balance the 2 degrees, which I eventually ended up dropping the music degree after some mental health issues and actual aphasia. Now I'm learning slowly that some of the causes of my inability to remember, not only I didn't have the capacity because my brain was so packed full of all kinds of information, but I have an issue with aphasia, which it seems to also go across to music. So it's like, and I'm not sure the amount of what this goes into it, but there's dyslexia in there as well. And while I can follow the patterns of the notes on the page very well, once it gets into muscle memory and photographic memory, it all starts doing this. So I'm not sure the extent of where that lies, but it has definitely held me back within remembering words and being able to keep even speech patterns in a succinct manner. So much less like having photographic chunks of the music in my head to play from memory. And at that time, I'm having the tendonitis issues. I'm also having memory issues. I'd had several concussions by that time. And there was no way that I could get help within the music department, or at least it didn't seem like I had the support that I needed to make it work. I tried to do like half lecture, half, because at that point in time I was only able to play about 30 minutes without being to the point where I couldn't anymore. My hands were so ripped up. And so it was like, while I was able to memorize the 60-minute chunk of music, I was not actually physically able to play it. And there was not a lot of support. So I ended up dropping at my final semester. Actually, I tried to push past that and continue to try to succeed. And I just finally bit the bullet and instead decided that my mental health was most important and to follow my art career. That being said, fast forward a few years, I had some pelvic abdominal damage. I thought I had herniated myself at one point in time after a cast iron conference. Did I change many things? No. And in 2017, after spending multiple summers working as a Jeep fabricator and doing metal welding and cast iron stuff, where I'm picking up several 100 pounds worth of stuff by myself, all without proper training, proper posture, all of those things, I found myself in grad school laying on the floor crying in utter pain yet again. And I had already started changing my nutritional habits, and I was doing yoga on my own, but it wasn't repairing. Not only had I not had a proper teacher in yoga to tell me how to properly hold myself and what muscles to engage and stuff like that, I had just been continually adding injury upon injury upon injury and more weight as far as lifting things. And I was convinced I could prove myself by just being this barbarian, basically, that I could be as good as any man. I could be as, ignore and push through my menstrual cycles. And I've had a lot of not only body dysmorphia around a lot of that, but I've also had a lot of imbalance from not fully embracing both my feminine and my masculine energy. I feel like you need to be able to swing to the center and be somewhere in the middle. And I've always been hyper masculine, hyper in control, hyper, like, always pushing and not having compassion for being a bleeding person, basically. And so, cycle tracking was not a thing for me at that time or anything. And in that, I thought I had completely derailed my grad school experience. And in many ways, it altered it, but it didn't change it in a lot of ways, because I was still able to do the casting and stuff like that. It just adjusted how I did things and probably put me further into textile work, but that's beside the point. At that point in time, I finally started getting some help in actually finding the root cause of a lot of the injury and issues. I have scoliosis. My left leg is shorter than my right leg, so it takes and causes everything in my hips to be off kilter. So I have a curve in my lower spine like this, and I also have a lot of pelvic tilt stuff because certain supportive muscles were underdeveloped, and I had other muscles that were overdeveloped and wouldn't release. So I had a lot of issues with my right shoulder. That whole entire section from the middle of my spine across, wrapping down around my hip, just stayed in a constant knot. And I was yet again in a brace, this time for my lower back. I was in and out of the chiropractic office multiple times a week, getting acupuncture, seeing private yoga instructors and stuff like this, all on a grad school stipend, right? And so, just continually, I had, the chiropractor was just basically getting me in there over and over and over again to suck me dry financially. There was no PT that was added into that. Anything that was done. It was, as far as progress physically, was because I made it happen. And within that, that's one of the stages that they were talking about in the 7 realistic stages of burnout on that podcast, is kind of the first go around, you won't admit defeat. Your overachiever pops in again, and you're going to heal yourself come hell or high water, basically, and you're not moving fast enough. It's also really hard to ask for help in this stage because you've been hyper independent. People have taught you over and over and over again through your life's experiences that support's not going to be there when you truly need it. Luckily, in this case, I did have, for the first time, a really good support system within the grad program. Not all of the professors were like that, I should say, and not all of the fellow grad students were, but luckily I had a fairly good core group of people. And not long after that, I found my now partner and fiance. And while it's not easy living with someone that's dealing with chronic pain and injuries like this, Aaron has always been there as a major support, not only physically to help me lift stuff, but also sometime when I start wallowing in self-pity, he's there with that boot up my ass that I need because I don't have the capacity to provide that. But it is definitely hard for a person that they've come into a relationship with expectations of having someone that is 100%, and that's not, or rarely is, the case, whether it's mental health. And with him, he's had to experience me struggling to heal my inner child and a lot of trauma that has built up over the years on top of this physical pain. And what I've found through my healing journey is there's so much tied physically to healing as well, that if we're just so stuck in those band-aid fixes that modern medicine is so attached to, that we don't ever find the root cause. And a lot of times, if we're holding tension in our body, it can tell us what we need to fix. So like with the lower back and stuff, that is root chakra deficiency, or something that we might not know about. We may be holding on to generational trauma that, unless we start unwinding, we may not be able to fully heal, and continue to have these layers and layers and layers of pain that we may be able to avoid if we just fix those issues too. Not saying that all chronic pain is the same at all. Believe me, there's I'm pretty lucky that all of mine, to an extent, is corrected by posture and maintaining physical movement and nutrition and easing my lifestyle a little bit, finding space and rest. Whereas with some people, their experience is vastly different, where everything's out of their control. Some parts they may be able to change by treating their whole body, by identifying some of the issues that they've experienced, the trauma that's still held in the body. But that's not always the case. If you have Lyme disease, or you have Ehlers-Danlos, or Did I say that right? I don't know. But a lot of the chronic pain or chronic syndromes that are out there, there's not a lot that we know about them per se, on how they can lead to how they can be fixed or healed fully. There's no true diagnosis, there's no true cure, right? Cure. But within chronic pain, while I know some of mine has the potential of being autoimmune, and connected to some of the issues that are hereditary in my family, I would say 75% of my issues have come from overwork, overwhelm, holding on to trauma that is either not mine or I took upon myself, that need to be released. And then there's also the physical things. So here, I was sitting at the pain management doctor, and I'm at that point in time, I guess around 31, 32, we're in the middle of the COVID lockdown. And throughout my life, all of my issues have been around weight. That's the automatic thing within our society, is to automatically jump to, if you'd lower your body mass index, if you'd lose some weight, if you would, that's a small factor in all of that. The body mass index is so off base because it doesn't show the actual health of an individual. It doesn't show the actual muscle mass. And with me, that has been one of the biggest things, is like, I hold a very heavy muscle mass because I have basically been a weight trainer for most of my life without even recognizing it. And that's one of my biggest things within the sculpture field, is in being a creator, is that we have to train for these things. The weekend warrioring mentality is so off base. It within sculpture culture, you try to, it's pretty much based around pizza, hamburgers, milkshakes, and drinking beer, or other alcohol. But that's one of the big proponents that I've been trying to teach, is we are actually athletes, and we need to view ourselves as such. Training between iron pours, training between, and it doesn't have to be extreme, but we have to maintain so we can have a sustainable practice. And that's one of the things academia does not teach us. If you have a really good teacher, they might show you some, but typically we teach through example in this. And for the vast majority of my instructors, the only things that I have seen in action is to take time for yourself, self-rest, time to play, and stuff like that. And that's great. But we also have to add in a little bit more of the actual movement and training process to prepare our bodies for picking up over 150 pounds, to, have proper posture to be able to do all of this, right? And so I'm sitting in this doctor's office, and they're resigning me to, basically, you're going to be on opioids, have surgery, all before the age of 35. And I was like, I've already told you that is not happening. I knew to the core of my being that the majority of my issues were muscular, and that I needed to be able to release and relax certain muscles mostly my glutes and my across my back, my lats, my deltoid, stuff like that. I knew that that was the core bit of it. Also, by improving your muscular stability, you can actually improve your posture. And through that, it's not a easy fix and it's not a quick fix, but it's retraining your muscle memory to actually get the pelvic tilt properly so that I wear risers for my shoes so that my hips even out. Actually, it kind of creates more pain most of the time. But, trying to create decompression as much as possible in that tilt and get everything straightened out. So you'll probably see me standing, if you're with me much, you might see me standing like a flamingo often. Luckily, I've found a massage therapist that I'm a colleague with at a wellness center. So she's actually helping me correct some of those stances and stuff. A lot of things that even physical therapists weren't able to work with me on. And so as I'm sitting there, this doctor's getting ruder and ruder because I won't take his solutions. I will not accept and resign myself to this life of pain and giving up my career and stuff, because note, I had been dealing with this for 2 years before I saw this doctor, and I had had improvement, but then I wasn't seeing the improvement that I wanted. I was also in the midst of COVID, went from being very, very active and being able to, walk a lot because I was in College Park in DC so much, then being basically stuck in quarantine into a house where I didn't have as much room. Yes, we were still walking to town, but I had physically gotten to the point where I wasn't even able to walk to town. So what happened when I first started grad school at University of Maryland, I was in DC all the time. I was logging 18 plus miles on my phone, from walking across DC, going to museums, stuff like that. Then I get to Germany and I was at a residency there and I was starting to get more and more fatigue. I was sick with respiratory issues the whole entire time and my back was going out. And I remember standing, in some of the museums and stuff like a flamingo and wondering why my whole entire right side was on fire, especially after I had been this extremely active person, walking constantly. That was my main mode of transportation and stuff like that. And then I get back home to my apartment in College Park, and all of that is pulled out from under me. I was no longer able to explore DC as much as I wanted to. I was in a brace and all of that. Then fast forward a couple of months, I met Aaron. I was still able to walk the mile into town here very easily, but by the second year our relationship, as COVID hit, I had still been pushing myself with picking up way too heavy stuff. Every time I'd make progress, then I'd push too hard and end up right back in the same entire space, right? And so I had seen these things come and go. And he's telling me that I need to resign myself to this life of disability, basically. And I'm more than convinced that I can, to an extent, fix. Yes, I had already went through the humbling, wallowing stage and stuff like that, but I knew to the core of my being that there was a different answer. And he's like, well, if you don't want to accept any of these things, you do live in Maryland. Would you like to try getting a green card? for medical marijuana. And of course, there's so many stigmas around that, but I had been playing around with it within, the realms of artists. They tend to find different ways of working through things. And I had experienced it previously, but I had never really embraced it thoroughly because of the stigma. And at that time, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try anything. If it's holistic, if it's plant medicine, whatever, I'm going to try it. Soon after, I started my energy healing journey too. So, finding Reiki and everything to add on top of the yoga and all of that, not only has it helped me physically, it's also helped me with being able to cut through some of the insanity in my head, because it quiets down all of the intrusive thoughts, all of because with neurodivergent brain, it's like you constantly got all of this feedback going on, and it's really hard to focus on what's important. So it, not only did it help me start easing and relaxing my muscular pain, it also started decreasing my stress and anxiety and making me be able to focus more. So, there's a lot of stories out there, and I'm sure that this won't be the first or the last time that I mention this, but if I had not found cannabis when I did, my life would be vastly different. And I wholeheartedly believe in that. Fast forward a little bit, they put me through physical therapy, and it was just a very small practice, more for getting people back into health after surgery and stuff like that. Most of their equipment wasn't heavy enough, or their belts and stuff weren't strong enough, so I was popping those and everything. And it was just that they weren't holistic at all, for one thing, and they were using the stem patches and stuff like that, and it didn't really help. And my insurance ran out, of course, and stuff like that. So I was trying to continue keeping up with it myself. I get pulled into adjuncting, and instead of giving myself the time that I needed to actually take care of myself, I fell into my people pleaser patterns, perfectionism, working, work hard, play harder type situation, as the world started coming back out of COVID. Because at that time I had went through the artist way. And that's just there because I'm running a group right now. And a lot of things were starting to point in the direction of, I need to make space in my life. I need to find more rest. I need to go with the flow and push less, not work harder, but actually find a flow. And I was still having these bouts of like total exhaustion. I felt like I had the flu at least once a week, once a month. Come to find out, that's a menstrual cycle thing. And that through cycle tracking, I can anticipate when I'm going to feel bad a little bit better, when my allergies are on a flare, stuff like that. And I even went to a rheumatologist at that point, because none of the tests were coming back conclusive on autoimmune stuff, arthritis, anything, and I'm still in so much pain. So the rheumatologist, she did all kinds of exams and tried to find out what the issues with tendonitis and stuff were. And she's like, honestly, the only thing that I can tell you at this point is you need to stop working so hard. I didn't understand how to do that. And it's been a long journey because like I've always been the type of, you're constantly grinding, you're constantly working hard and doing something, mostly because my brain won't slow down long enough. Like if I've got the TV on, I often have to be knitting or doing something like that. That's not great for my hands when I already have issues. And so it's like, it also affects you being able to be in the present moment, because half the time I'd be working on my phone because Canva is an app, and Instagram and Facebook, and I was constantly working on my business and fulfilling orders and stuff like that. And so I finally started to take that to heart. Like I cannot be my most authentic self. I cannot continue to show up in a sustainable fashion if I keep doing everything for everyone. I have to first take care of myself. And so that brings me back to the fried podcast that I mentioned earlier, and I'll drop the information into the show notes and everything, because it was so interesting. While hers is slightly different from mine, like I've experienced the issues with allergies, because I literally feel like sometimes that my allergies are purely stress reactions, and it's a mental thing rather than a physical reaction, or like an actual allergic reaction. And I've been telling my doctors this for a while, but again, nobody really listens that much. And so taking that knowing and applying the herbalism and the energy healing and stuff has really helped. All of these things that I've been studying for years, herbalism has been in my life for over 18 years. And, being able to make these subtle changes that are so, it's a fight. I will tell you that. It's definitely a fight. And most of the doctors will not listen to you or even accept it. Finding those doctors that will, or at least will let you experiment without like shutting you down, is so important. But within listening to Mandy Letho's, I'm sure I'm screwing up her name, but listening to her story, and the same with Caitlin's. Yeah, Caitlin is the main interviewer on the podcast. Our stories are so similar. And they were talking about that there's 7 stages to burnout. And, you have denial. I'm just going to keep pushing. I need to push harder. That's just what it is. I can't, there's not something wrong, right? I just have to keep going. Then you hit rock bottom. And that's where you start having the triage. You start picking up the pieces. You start at square one and start working up, right? And then they talk about the hack your healing stage. And that was really where it seems like all of us hit that same point where it's like we start getting, step by step things that can help us heal, and we throw our all at it, right? That come hell or high water, I'm going to heal myself. That overachiever sneaks in, right? And what she mentions is not all of these stages are going to be the same for everyone. You might have them in different orders. You might have some and not all, or you might have others. So, if you have experienced any of this, definitely, share your experience in the comments or private message me or something, because the more we document and share our experiences, the more we are validated, for one thing, which is something that is often not, we don't experience when we are in burnout and experiencing chronic pain and disabilities and stuff. We often do not get the validation we need or the answers, and we don't have the support or the community around it because there's so many stigmas around it that we often don't talk. And for the able-bodied people in our lives that don't experience migraines, don't experience chronic fatigue, don't experience chronic pain, anxiety, depression, stuff like that, they don't know how to even show compassion or empathy toward that because they don't realize how much you're actually covering up to make them feel comfortable. And so within that, after the hack your healing stage, they talk about reluctant surrender. This is the realization phase or the resignation phase of, okay, this is my situation. I've tried all of these things already that didn't work, or it worked partially, but I'm missing something. And you reluctantly surrender into the stage of humbling yourself to accept. And a lot of times, and this goes back to the excuses and blame video that I created like last week. Oftentimes we'll stay in this stage of wallowing, of making excuses for why we can't change, why we can't get better, why we shouldn't even try, and blaming others for why we got hurt to begin with or why we're experiencing it. It was hereditary. If I didn't treat my mother like this, then I wouldn't have been cursed. Yes, all of these things are things that I've experienced and said or something at one time or the other. We can stay in this wallowing stage, and a lot of people do. And when you are dealing with disabilities, when you're dealing with chronic pain, it can seem like your whole entire world has ended. Especially when just the other day, you were this able-bodied human being, able to do so many things. You were capable of so many things. And then you're literally sheared off at the knees, or you're put into a straitjacket, and you're not able to do even the most minute form of that without suffering complete exhaustion and setting yourself back. So that's what happens a lot of times, is we resign ourselves purely to, this is where we are in our life, and we just accept that. And that's fine. You know, everybody's path is different, and the way that we approach it is totally okay for us. And, you know, not to put out false hope or say that healing is totally possible and fixing or making a reversal of these is possible. And especially as we're starting to see more issues with long-term COVID and things like that. And even within neurodivergency, you know, we're finding out that hypermobility and even shortened lifespans and stuff are more of a thing for neurodivergent people. Then, you know, it is possible to sit and wallow in these what seem to be life-altering or life-ending experiences. And then they talk about chutes and ladders. I call this the decision-making stage. You can decide to stay in that space of resignation and just be that person that you are now stuck in this box and this thing, or you can make the decision to make change. And understanding that you are no longer who you used to be. Let's find this new person, this wholeness, or the whole mess, as they talked about it. Because we are all, our experiences are each so uniquely different. And we can find our true purpose and our true passion in whatever stage of this whole mess we're in. We just have to accommodate and make changes where necessary. And so this is the, the chutes and ladders is the decision-making stage where we can stay in that wallowing and resign ourselves to just being this thing that is totally obsessed with our condition, and resigning ourselves to a life of, discouragement and negativity. Or we can start seeking our own answers and making accommodations and adjusting our life to make it more accessible to live to our fullest authentic selves and be as, live with fulfillment and abundance, right? And remember that a lot of times we wrap our whole entire personality and identity up in what we do. I know I certainly did. I have had many detours in my life that have stripped me of the things that I thought I was. I thought I was a classical musician. I thought I was an iron caster or, metallurgist, all of those things. Those are not who I am at the core of my being. Those are things I do, but they're not my personality and my identity. So regardless of what our meat suit does to us, that is not who we are. No matter what our career is, that is not who we are. And so remembering that, we can live abundant, fulfilling lives at whatever stage we are in is the most important thing. And to find accommodations. It's just like taking to the yoga mat. We can strive for this optimal pose, crow pose, or standing on our heads and being the best yogi ever. But that turns it into a performance instead of actually making it do what it needs to in our body. So taking accommodations to make sure that we're not injuring ourselves and accommodating pain and stuff like that is so important to remember. Because like with me, I have a lot of tendonitis issues and just pain in general. So being, pushing my hands full force into the ground, locking my elbows or whatever, and putting weight onto my arms, even though I can lift my full weight and hold my full weight with just my arms, it does not mean that I should be. And so if it causes pain, find an accommodation for it. There's many teachers that are doing trauma-informed and accommodation style teaching, and it doesn't matter your mobility, like ability to do these poses, because you can accommodate them in any form or fashion. And if a teacher says that you can't, don't listen to them. Because you can do yoga in your wheelchair. You can do yoga using a chair as assistance to help you get in and out of the floor. You can use blocks. You can use instead of doing down dog with your hands fully out like that because it hurts, flip it to where you're keeping your arms straight and providing more stability there instead of putting all of the weight on your wrist and stuff like that. Same thing with stretches. Use props. That's what they're there for, and they're there to make sure that the practice works for you, not you work for the practice. This is not a performance. It's about you working into your body and doing what feels good to you, not trying to force yourself into looking like the person on the front of the magazine. That's not the reality. So, let me see. I think I've covered everything, at least for now. But definitely go listen to that podcast. It is absolutely amazing. The way that they talk about the different stages, and then also provide an insight into I'm not alone in this experience. I'm not the only one that has gotten cocky with my healing and tried to, overdo and just push through it, and instead of going with the flow, and falling into old cycles and old patterns and listening to the negativity and the criticism and self-doubt from the inner critic. It's all part of the journey, and we all have to find our way through it ourselves. Yes, we can find guides that can walk side by side with us on the path to help us navigate detours and navigate road bumps or parts of the map that are not charted. If you need help, there's plenty of people out there, including myself, that provide those types of coaching processes and containers. And there's lots and lots of resources out there as stigma is starting to be broken down, and we're talking about these things more. And the only way that we can continue to find answers and continue to break down the stigmas around this is if we keep talking about them. So again, I invite you, if something hit home within the story, it resonated with you, your experiences, whatever, let me know. Please let me know. And share with others that you think that this might help. But the road is never easy, and it's not going to be easy. In other words, there are detours, but there is hope. That is the main thing. Remember that there is hope and there is possibilities of change out there. And you can find help and support. And that is one of the hardest things to do, is reach out for support however you need it. If you need a therapist, which for some reason therapy doesn't seem to really work with me, but there's other options. You might find a sacred circle or an AA group or something where you are able to share your story. Find what works for you and find who you connect with and what you connect with along your journey. And if in some form of this, that what I have shared and what I'll continue to share resonates with you, I hope you stay along for the journey by hitting the like, share, and subscribe button, because like I said, we have to be our own support system and build our own wolf pack and tear down the stigma. So all my chronic pain and disability warriors out there, stand in solidarity, and we've got this. just keep trucking, and there more and more answers will keep coming as we work through this. So, like I said, share your experience in the comments or privately with me. I'd love to hear them. And always remember, trust your inner knowing and start trying to find the flow and the space in your life instead of forcing it. And I'll be right there working alongside with you. Have a great week.